and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to talk about an odd little rabbit hole I stumbled down on Reddit. And content warning before we get any further, I am going to be talking very frankly about difficult topics in this video like self-harm, and also mentioning some other things like mental health problems and eating disorders and substance abuse issues. I won't be showing any images. I'm going to try not to show any of the subreddits I'm talking about. I'm going to try not to show any of the posts that I'm talking about, but I do think it's very important to be open and frank with how we talk about this. So if you think you'll find this difficult, then I understand. If you need to take a break or skip this one entirely, do not worry about it. And also, this video is almost definitely absolutely going to be demonetized. So if you would like to help support me and my work and help me keep making videos like this, which YouTube won't like, but I think are important to talk about, then you can support me over on Patreon, where you get access to extra photos and script notes and a Discord server. And there's also some options to get art, prints and stickers and stuff sent out to you. Or I have new merch available, like this awesome hoodie right here, which I love. I don't know if you can kind of see. This is the cropped flamingo hoodie and I love it. It's the coziest little thing. It's got my own paintings on. I love it. All that stuff's available down in the description. But for now, let's talk about this stuff because it's quite serious. So this all started when I saw a post on something like r/creepypms or one of those kinds of subreddits, and it involved a guy messaging a 14-year-old girl to ask for inappropriate pictures. Now obviously she was grossed out by this and she completely shut him down, reported him, and then posted the screenshots to this sub. And, you know, great on her for realizing that that was wrong, for not being manipulated into anything. Great on her for behaving in a really mature, responsible way. Fantastic. She shouldn't have had to. The problem is entirely with the adult in that situation, but good on her anyway. Credit where it's due. However, what really concerned me, I mean obviously that was concerning, but what also concerned me was how that conversation with him started in the first place. She was a 14-year-old child who'd been posting images of herself self-harming and her physical cuts and opened wounds on Reddit. And he was an adult man who saw these posts and sent her a private message complimenting her on her cuts. He called them pretty. And the girl thanked him for it. And now, when she posted these screenshots to this subreddit, thankfully a lot of comments called it out and kindly educated her, but it got me scrolling through her other posts and then the posts of other people and the people who were commenting on her posts, and I ended up going down this crazy deep rabbit hole where there are hundreds of people, mostly teenagers, but not completely, who are posting self-harm images online. And all these people are encouraging it. Like I say, I have screenshots of everything I'm going to talk about, but I don't really want to show them in this video because I don't want people to go to these subreddits. I don't want people to look at these posts. I don't want to draw any more attention to it. So I think it's better if we just talk about it and I don't inadvertently direct traffic there. So as I was scrolling more and more and searching more and more, I found private subreddits dedicated specifically to this. People started posting on their Reddit pages rather than specific subreddits. And I saw these little communities forming. I saw the same usernames over and over again, all posting their own images and commenting on each other's images and photos. Some of them were saying how nice the placement of the cuts were. Some of them were saying oh, that's a really nice color of blood. Some of them were sharing images of their razors and tools and lighters and this is my self-harm kit, this is what I use, this is how I do it. And some people were saying, oh, those cuts look like mine, how did you do that? And so on. One comment literally read, not sure if I can compliment, but I love the placement of the cuts. The blood is a really nice color. Make sure to disinfect. It was all just so normalized and they were all encouraging each other. And I think the most concerning thing I saw was that when I looked back at individual post histories, with the majority of these people, when they first started posting, they would just post these images of maybe 2 or 3 cuts here or there, or things that semi-healed, and then over time the cuts got bigger, they got deeper, there were more of them. It got more and more extreme as time went on. The more they posted, the more validation they got, and the worse they hurt themselves. And I mean, this kind of escalation is sadly incredibly common amongst people who self-harm. And sadly, I know this because I've been struggling with this exact issue for going on 15 years now. However, the time it took for me to escalate what I was doing to myself was over a period of years. It was a lot faster in these communities. The escalation happened over periods of weeks and months, not kind of what we normally see. It was a lot quicker. It's like they were unconsciously competing with each other, so they allowed themselves to hurt themselves worse and worse over a very short period of time, and this is incredibly concerning. The other thing was that most of these people were posting in teen-specific subreddits, and that concerns me a lot, because teen-specific subreddits are something that I have thoughts and feelings about anyway. To me, they're just a breeding ground for predators. I get that teens need a place to talk to other people their age, but like from what I've seen, a lot of it is just, you know, you're directing predators right to exactly who they want, to potential victims, and then when you start seeing vulnerable people posting about being vulnerable, like these images, it is problematic, and I think it needs considerably better moderation from adults who are, this might sound extreme, but adults who are trained to work with children, and you know, people who aren't gonna be predators. Well, we hope. But I mean, in terms of talking specifically about posting the images of self-harm online, I think it's very easy for an outsider to look at it and say, oh, well, you know, freedom of speech is super important. Oh, you can't censor the internet. Let people make their own choices about what they consume. And while I agree with that to some extent, when it comes to this kind of thing, I just can't, and I don't agree with it. And I know some people call me a hypocrite for saying like, oh, I think freedom of speech in some places, but not a, like, call me a hypocrite if you want, but I think the safety of children is far more important than that. Kids and teenagers are already impressionable. Add in another layer of vulnerability because of mental health problems that they're facing, and I don't believe they really have the capacity to understand what they're consuming and the effect it has on them when they look at self-harm content like this. As an adult, when I'm going through one of my bad stages, like whether it's a depressive episode or a manic episode or whatever, like the point is, when I'm in a bad place where I self-harm, I don't think I have the capacity to understand some of the media that I'm consuming sometimes. And I'm like, you know, turning 29 in a couple of weeks. Even for me, I'm in a semi-good place at the minute-ish, but even for me, seeing these posts and making this video as a fully grown adult woman in therapy, I found this incredibly triggering, and I can't imagine what effect this would have had on me if I'd seen this, you know, back when I was 14 or back when I was at my lowest points at like 20, 21. It's crazy. For me, the escalation was a slow process over years. You know, I was in a really bad place mentally when I was a teenager, and I would start by, like, I'm sorry if this is too graphic for people, I just kind of want to explain what the process was. I don't want to glamorize this at all. I don't want to encourage other people to do it, but when I was 14, I would start with like holding my arm against these like ridiculously dangerously hot radiators in Fulford when, you know, like bullying in classes got too much and stuff. I would hold my arm against these radiators until it burnt, and then that escalated to scratching myself and digging my nails into myself until I drew blood, and then that carried on for about, I don't know, 3 years or so, and then eventually that escalated to cutting myself. And again, sometimes it would start with 1-2 cuts here or there, just to kind of like, you know, ease the noise in your mind a bit. And then over the years that grew and grew and grew until when I was like 21, 22, I was cutting myself every day, several times a day, and badly. There would not be like an inch of this arm that wasn't covered. And as horrible as that is, you have to remember that that was a 7-8 year process for me that grew and developed over time as I got worse and worse and worse. What I was sadly seeing on places like Reddit here was that that escalation was happening for people over a period of 5-6 months. If I'd seen this sort of stuff when I was in that state, I think that would have happened to me too. And that's really concerning. Not everyone agrees with me though. I did look up some posts on Reddit of people talking about this, and one person of an unknown age claimed that, and I quote, "Self-harm pics really help me and maybe help other people too. They don't trigger me. If they trigger me, I might just not go to that sub." But I have to disagree entirely, because it's really not that simple. And as I've said, especially when you're in a bad place, you can't just not go to that sub, especially if, you know, the posts come up on your home feed or you're in this like endless scrolling cycle. Sometimes you can't help but look. Sometimes it's impossible to look away, and this is why I do things like, when I know things are going to be bad for my own mental health, and I know I'm gonna get like obsessive about it and I know it's gonna hurt me and I'm just gonna keep looking, I have a very, very strict policy with blocking people on social media. So if someone's done something to hurt me and upset me, I block them. And I just don't allow myself to like look at their profiles or see anything they do ever, and I just block it out completely because that's the only way I can cope with it. Otherwise I end up looking and looking and looking until I feel worse and worse. So like a couple of months back, like I was dating someone and I found out he lied to me about some really big stuff, especially about some women in particular. And so my first thing I had to do was like, I just need to block them on everything. Like I went through Instagram and Facebook, and I mean that's the only social media I have, but I went through everything and I needed to block their profiles because otherwise I would just end up looking and looking and looking and making myself feel worse and worse. Because like, especially if I'm in like a bit of a manic state or a high anxiety state or anything like that, I can't stop myself. Like there's no logic working in my brain, I can't stop. So I have to put up those physical like boundaries while I'm in a better place and just block them completely. And like this guy and his friends were like, oh, that's crazy, I can't believe she's doing that. And I hate being called crazy. It upsets me so much and it hurts me so much. And I was like, I don't really care if you think it's crazy. I don't really care if these women get offended because I'm blocking them. Like, I'm doing this so I don't mess myself up even more. Like, sometimes you have to do these things. And I think it's incredibly rude that they called me crazy for it. Like, I don't know, anyway. Still upsets me. The point is, for a lot of these kids, when they find this content, they're not in the logical state of mind where they can say, oh, this is harming me, I'll just block it and move away. They're not in that state of mind. This thought process that leads to, oh, well, I better just stop looking at it, doesn't happen. And if it does, it takes a long time to get there and it's difficult to get there. It doesn't come easy. And so this is why I think it's important that I guess we censor what these kids can see in the first place, because if they don't have the capacity to understand that it's harming them, they're not going to block it themselves. Not everyone is going to be triggered by self-harm pictures, but enough of us are that it's a concern. And while not everyone will agree, I think the best way to protect vulnerable people is not to risk them being able to see triggering content in the first place when they're in a vulnerable state. So for me, lots of different kinds of online content trigger me, and the way I deal with this is that when I'm in a good logical headspace, I block it so I don't see it when I'm in a vulnerable headspace. But a lot of teenagers can't or won't do that, or they won't understand the importance of doing that. Or a lot of these teenagers don't have that logical state to think, oh, self-harm images are bad, better block them. Or some people don't find this content until they've already bypassed the logical stage and they go straight to the vulnerable stage and it triggers them and it's a whole problem. And that's why these things still happen to me. If I find out something when I'm in like a bad headspace, like if I already see something when I'm in a bad headspace, it messes me up even more, because like once I'm already there in that manic or anxious or depressive episode, I don't think, oh, I better block this. Like my brain just doesn't go there for some reason. It just thinks, let's obsess over this until it hurts us even more. You know, I don't know if I'm making sense. But the point is, sometimes I wish people would come along and remove the content that triggers me online so I don't see it when I'm vulnerable. But when it comes to things just like, you know, some girl's Facebook post, I can't really ask people to do that, so it's something I have to step in and do for myself. But when it comes to something as serious as self-harm images, I don't think it's inappropriate to ask that they be removed online and they not be allowed to be posted online. Does that make sense? So another poster commented with a similar view to me, and they said, I feel like better safe than sorry, and people are just doing the best they can for the most part to help. Personally, I benefit from banning those kinds of subreddits. Another person said, I agree, I always find myself looking at pictures even though it just ends up making me feel like I'm not cutting deep enough. It's so triggering. But I just can't stop myself finding and looking at the pictures. And then the original poster said something which I think is incredibly revealing. So they said, the only difference to just Googling self-harm images is that a subreddit with self-harm pictures offers easier interaction with a community that's looking for what you're looking for. When I started cutting myself, the only thing that made me feel valid was when I posted an image to a subreddit and someone said it was deep and I should be careful. So revealing. Communities are so influential in our lives, and while this person here was trying to use the idea of community to defend their stance that self-harm pictures are good, I think this actually proves why they're so harmful. When you're part of a community who are all all partaking in destructive behaviours, it's very unlikely that any of you will stop or get better. Instead, it would be much better to join a community that wants to see you succeed, who will try and help you and support you without judgment. I guess the difference is, like, if you're an alcoholic, you can choose to be around other alcoholics all drinking together in a pub, or you can choose to go to a support group and try and stop drinking together. Both offer community and support and a sense of belonging and understanding, but only one of those groups is going to actively help try and stop your harmful and destructive behaviours. I also found a few interesting little articles online speaking about this, not only on Reddit but across all social media. So this also used to be an incredibly common issue over on Tumblr and Instagram before policy changes were made, and I feel like a policy change to Reddit would be incredibly beneficial because they've helped on these other platforms, and I feel like it would help on Reddit as well. So one BBC article tells us of a 12-year-old girl who said she was hooked on posting videos of herself cutting. According to the article, Libby, now 16, recalls sharing pictures of her fresh cuts with 8,000 followers. You start becoming part of it, you get almost stuck, she says. It was almost like you had to keep up with it, otherwise people would turn away and stop caring. I'd see people and then my brain would go, that's okay, it doesn't matter how bad it gets because they're not dead, it hasn't killed them yet, it made it safe to do worse. Then her dad goes on to describe how he saw comments from people giving instructions and advice about how to hurt yourself and what tools to use, which is incredibly similar to what I was seeing over on Reddit. Another article, this time for Grazia, tells of a girl who, once she found images of self-harm online at 14, she says, straight away I'd found my own community. She then goes on to say, I came across so many of them and found them so easily that the idea of posting similar images started feeling very normal, and that's when I began to post my own. At the time, I felt opening up to the online world stopped me from feeling so alone. Social media was a safe space where I could say whatever I wanted behind the comfort of a screen. And then she goes on to describe how the community eventually got very competitive. And I think this is all really, really telling. These people want to feel like they belong. They want a sense of community, and I understand because I've been there too. Many times I'm still in that mindset. I still feel that way. I understand it. So they don't realize that the community they're already a part of is actually destructive and dangerous. And I know personally, when you feel alone, often you'll cling to anyone you can, even when they hurt you, and you don't always realize the damage that's being done. Now, of course, I don't think I can discuss this topic without being critical of my own part in it, because I'm not just some bystander here going, ooh, look at this bad thing the kids are being exposed to. I'm someone who has the power to both affect and be affected by this kind of content. Even as an adult, I find myself negatively affected by seeing these posts. However, I'm also aware that as a public figure, I need to make sure I don't inadvertently make any kind of triggering content like this myself. And this is something that's actually kind of difficult for me to get my head around, because sometimes I don't think I realize or understand the level of influence that I had. In my head, I'm still just this average person. I'm very used to being a nobody and fading into the background. And so suddenly, I say suddenly, it's been like 4 years and it still doesn't feel real. I have to suddenly be aware that my actions can actually influence people on a really wide scale. And that is a lot. It's a lot of responsibility. It's constant work, it's effort, it's hard because these things don't come naturally to me. I don't really understand a lot of the social implications of things. I don't really understand a lot of normal social cues and social behaviour. I find it very difficult to understand how people interpret me and see me. And so now it's not just that like, oh, that might lead to a little social faux pas here and there. It's like, no, if I mess up at this thing that I'm already bad at, I could potentially harm a hell of a lot of people. And that's difficult, and it makes it very, very scary. I guess the important thing is that I want to make it very, very, very clear that while I struggle with self-harm myself, I will never, ever, ever be someone who promotes or condones self-harming. If I ever got to that point, for example, where I was, for example, known for being a content creator who self-harms, then I would need to make some big changes. I think there's a difference between being, like a content creator who makes book reviews and social commentary, blah, 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 and oh, by the way, I also have these mental health problems and I self-harm. And, oh, she's a content creator who self-harms. Huge, huge difference there. And I want to make sure I never, ever, ever cross over to that side. And I think this is something that many, many, many public figures need to be aware of, because sometimes we'll see something, we'll open up about something, and that thing gets attention. And we think, oh, we'll talk about it more. Oh, people want to hear about this. Let's talk about it more and more and more. And it's like this validation loop, but it gets unhealthy because being known for destructive behaviors is unhealthy for both the content creator and their audience. I think, to summarize this, one of the big differentiators is, are you a public figure who struggles with doing something bad, or are you a public figure who is known for doing something bad? And to me, there's a huge difference. I actually spoke about this in Evangelina Scott's video about Eugenia Cooney. And while I don't know Eugenia personally, and I don't know her content all that well, and I didn't necessarily want to speak to, I guess, like specifically on that topic and that example, I think a lot of what I said in that interview is kind of relevant here, because no person is completely perfect, and it is completely unrealistic and wrong for anyone to expect them to be. No one person is morally perfect either. Even social commentators and commentary channels and, God hell, even like philosophy channels and whatever, and people who talk about, you know, like moral and ethical implications of this and this and this, even those content creators are not morally perfect. Everyone does bad stuff sometimes, whether intentional or not, but it's important to know that this is what makes us human, but also ask, how does this behavior affect others? In the case of public figures specifically, how does this affect their audience? Take, for example, an actor who's putting on this like amazing performance, but behind their scenes they're struggling with substance abuse issues. I think as long as they're trying to get help for those issues, they don't glamorize it, as long as they understand the seriousness of those issues, and as long as they don't encourage other people to do the same, I don't think it's a problem. I don't think we should ever punish someone for having mental health problems like substance abuse issues. We shouldn't say, oh, let's ban them from ever being in another film until they're sober because they have a substance abuse problem. However, if an actor with a substance abuse problem was posting all over social media about how they were drinking or taking drugs and making it seem like this super fun, cool thing, if they couldn't do their job because of their problems, if they refused to get any help, if they were encouraging fans to drink or take drugs too, I think that would be a massive problem, and that would hurt their fans, and that's something where someone would need to step in and stop them from doing any more harm and stop them from posting any more of that kind of content. Does that make sense? And in my mind, it's exactly the same with YouTubers. I don't think we should take away someone's platform and income just because they have something going on in their personal lives that they're struggling with. Obviously, there are behaviors and problems which can be destructive and harmful and should not be encouraged. For example, self-harm, substance abuse, eating disorders, and so on. But most of these things have underlying mental health problems causing it, and so I don't think it's necessarily fair to blame people or punish them for struggling with these things. If you had an art creator who was known for posting videos of oil paintings of buildings, for example, and it came out that behind the scenes she had an eating disorder, I think it would be completely unfair to like ban her content, her videos or whatever, and take away her income and punish her because she's ill. And chances are, if you punish her for being ill and take away her income and her livelihood and everything, she's less likely to recover. To me, that's a really, really, really bad thing. She can't help being ill and having an eating disorder, but you shouldn't take away her right to paint pictures of buildings for that. But what about if that same art creator started moving away from paintings of buildings and started painting pro-anorexia paintings? What if she started all her videos with body checking? What if she only painted drastically underweight people and went on to her audience about how beautiful that was and gorgeous and stunning and how we should all try and look like that? What if, as well as just talking about painting and art content, she started talking about how little she ate and what specifically she ate and how other people could eat as little as she did, for example? I think that would be an issue. Any or all of those things would be an issue. Then you're not just a content creator who's suffering with a health condition, you're a content creator who's actively creating harmful content which will hurt others and promotes dangerous behavior. And I think there is a massive difference there. And to me, when that kind of content is being created, I think someone does need to step in and say, hang on, no, this kind of content probably shouldn't be online and available to vulnerable people. And I think it's exactly the same with self-harm. I know that as a content creator myself, I constantly feel immense pressure to do the right thing, even when I'm fighting with myself over stuff, even when I'm struggling myself. I've had this issue for over half my life at this point, and every time I used to hurt myself, I'd feel guilt and shame about it. But over time, that started to go away and that started to fade, and it just became this normal part of my life, a normal coping mechanism. And there are even times where like I didn't even think about like covering up cuts or scars on my arm because it was so normal to me and I didn't think anything of it. And I remember one of my friends asked me once, like we were on the tube, and he was like, are you okay with like your arm out like that? And I went, oh, it's fine, no one even notices, it's all good. And he like looked at me and went, he was like, Rachel, everyone's looking. And I realised that, yeah, there were like a lot of people on the tube just like staring at me awkwardly at my arm, and it made me feel uncomfortable, but it was also an eye-opener that I'd normalised this behaviour so much. I didn't realise how unhealthy it was anymore. I didn't realise how abnormal it was. And that moment, combined with like me starting YouTube and stuff, like all that guilt and shame came flooding back to me. And the first like 2 or so years I was on YouTube, I was absolutely terrified of people finding out about like my self-harm issues. And there were a few times where like I didn't manage to properly cover up my arm or cuts that I had in a video, and people would comment and I'd freak out and I'd delete their comments and I'd block them and I'd spiral, and usually that'd lead me to hurting myself even more. And it was it was a really, really hard way to live, to be honest. But like after Essence of Thought went on their big bullying rampage and was being a horrible person and all that stuff, like, and I had like a really incredibly public breakdown. After all that, I guess I decided to stop trying to hide the fact I had self-harm issues and just be a bit more honest about it. But even that comes with its own set of complications too. It's not just, oh, okay, it's out in the public now, everything's good. No, because how do I speak openly and honestly and try and help people without ever normalizing this behavior, or God forbid, glamorizing this behavior? How do I speak honestly about it and say this is something I still do sometimes and struggle with, whilst also still telling people this is a really, really harmful, dangerous thing, please don't do it? The times when I do feel strong enough to talk about it, there are so many things I need to be careful of and make sure of. I need to make sure that people know that this is not something to be ashamed of, but it's not something to be proud of either. This is not uncommon behavior, but it's not healthy or normal either. This is not something that makes me a bad person, but it's not something that makes me good or cool or edgy either. I want to be honest with my viewers, and I want other people who are going through or who've gone through the same thing to be able to relate to me and understand me and hopefully learn something from me. But I never, ever, ever want someone to look at me or hear me and say, well, if Rachel does it, I can do it too. I never want someone to look at a nice photo I've taken and think, oh, well, if she still looks nice and confident when she has scars and cuts, then it's not a big deal for me if I do it either. I never, ever want people to view me like that, because it's not okay. Even when I do it, it's dangerous. This is absolutely something I struggle with and try and fight constantly, and it's not a part of my life that's glamorous or exciting or fun. My scars aren't what make me beautiful and any of that crap. They're not some symbol of my bravery or strength or any of that other nonsense I've seen online. You know, these like toxically positive Instagram posts about, oh, my scars are like reminders of everything I've been through, they're so beautiful. No, they're not beautiful at all. They're not positive reminders of anything. They're part of a harmful, destructive behaviour that I wish I could stop. And I continually and actively work to try and avoid every single day. I constantly fight with myself over this. It's something I constantly try to not do. And the last thing I want is for anyone else to go through this either. I do impose quite strong rules for myself like trying to make sure I never show any fresh cuts on camera. I rarely show any scarring when possible. It is difficult sometimes because, like, you know, when I've had a bad like relapse or something, you'll often see me wearing long sleeves or posing with like an arm behind my back or to the side or something like that. Sometimes I have photoshopped out cuts because I don't want to glamorize it. But like I say, sometimes things slip through because, like, I'm not perfect, I can't spot everything. Sometimes like an arm will pop up in a video, or I'll roll up my sleeves without thinking about it, or I don't know, it's in a photo that someone else has taken or something, and I find it really, really hard, and I don't always know what other people will see or think or how they'll interpret things, so it makes it all really, really difficult. And it feels like I'm just walking through this minefield, and I'm already like struggling internally with myself, and then I have this external fight as well, and it's a lot. But I guess the point of what I'm trying to say is that the only reason I talk about this stuff is because I want other people to know that you shouldn't be ashamed of asking for help or seeking therapy or medications or asking friends or family for support or finding alternate coping mechanisms. You should never ever be ashamed of that. Like I said, this is not uncommon behaviour, and there are a lot of people who go through it, but it is still dangerous and harmful and something that no one should be doing, myself included. It's something that I'm in therapy to help with. It's something that I've been on and off medication for a few years. It's something that I'm continually like trying to find other ways to cope. It's not a good part of me. Like I say, it's not necessarily something I'm ashamed of anymore, but it's not a part of me that I'm proud of either. Not by a long shot. Interestingly though, like if you are kind of interested in this kind of topic, I guess as difficult as it is, just last week I posted this kind of like visual poem sort of thing, kind of related to this, over on Patreon. Maybe one day I'll get up the courage to post it properly publicly, but I don't know. I'm very nervous about it, and it's incredibly personal, so we'll see. I also had a second one that I just finished that I might post over there soon, but again, I don't know. It's personal and I need to be a little braver, I think. It was quite funny. So I posted this poem over on Patreon and asked for some feedback, and people gave me this amazing feedback, and it was really useful and helpful, and I appreciate it, and it was really, really good. But what was funny was that when I posted it over on Patreon and said that I was nervous to post it publicly, I meant because I thought that the poetry wasn't good enough, and I thought it was going to be like ripped apart for being crap poetry, and that's what I was scared of. And then all these comments were like, oh yeah, it's incredibly personal, like, oh, I don't know if I'd want this public too. And I was like, oh, and people were like, yeah, you'll definitely get criticized for these like thoughts on mental health, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, so that was a whole thing that I didn't think of. I thought people were just going to tell me that my poetry was crap, and I was scared of that. Not that people would criticize me for, like, saying I have mental health issues. But that's another anxiety awoken, so thank you. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of these things. Again, I know I'll probably be criticized by certain people, and there are a lot of people who, when they find out I have like issues with self-harm and stuff, they do use it against me, and they try and make out that like it makes me, I don't know, unreliable or a terrible person or whatever, like any of those things. But I know it's not true. I know it just makes me human. I know it's just something I have to struggle with and work on, and yeah, screw the people who use it against me. My notes have ended. I'm just rambling at this point. I've no idea. Anyway, if you want to go see that poem, it's called Broken, and it is personal, and it's something that I worked really hard on for a long time, both like the concept and the visuals and the writing and the everything. So if you want to see that, you can over on Patreon. Like, I think it starts at like $1 a month, and it's, yeah. Sorry to put it behind a paywall, it's just I wanted a small audience to start with, but like, please don't feel any pressure to like spend any money or anything if you can't. It's not a big deal. Once I'm braver, it'll probably just be made public for free, but I need to work up that confidence a little first, you know? It's one of those things. Anyway, yes, okay, I'm done. Sorry, this was heavy. I'm a little bit emotional. I'm a little all over the place, but thank you for your time. Thank you for watching today. Please, if you have any thoughts on this, like the original sort of like Reddit posts, and how do you feel about people being able to post self-harm images online? Do you think it needs more moderation? Do you think it should just be allowed? Do you think it would be bad to censor these kinds of posts? And also, how do you feel about content creators I guess, like myself, but also other people like, I guess, Eugenia Cooney and other creators who have mental health problems, who have substance abuse issues, who have problems with self-harm, who have eating disorders, that kind of thing. How do you feel about them being allowed to still create content? And what do you think the rules and boundaries should be surrounding that? Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments. But for now, thank you for watching today. Don't forget to go check out the new merch because I love it. This is just one of the few designs available. I also have cute cats and cute mushrooms and all sorts of cute stuff on hoodies and t-shirts and stuff like that. Yeah, thank you for watching and I'll see you again really, really soon. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day.